name for us. Watch this space. Okay, but basically, if you do have an incident with another vessel that's not competing, you need to complete a vessel incident report. Go to our website or come into the sailing office down here. They should be able to supply you with a copy of the incident report. Go on our website, download it, fill it out, and lodge it with us. It needs to be lodged within 24 hours of the incident. If you do have a collision with another vessel that's in the that's also racing, you still need to fill out an incident report, which is a more abbreviated version, and let the sailing office know. One of the requirements for the aquatic licence for the club is that they report all incidents. If requested by Maritime, they must supply an incident report about the incident. Now, a lot of the time, the incident's not going to happen around the start line. The start boat's not going to know about it. The committee's busy doing starting, finishing, all that sort of thing. So you need to report it to them. You can't leave it up to the club to chase you to get the information. So can you please report the incident to the club, so that then when we come ring up Justine and the sailing office and say, we need to report on this incident, she can then say, put her hands on something and give us some information. A lot of the time, we don't actually investigate, or we don't do in-depth investigations into incidents that occur on the racetrack. A lot of the time, they get dealt with by the protest committee and that sort of stuff, and we're happy to go with the results of that sort of investigation or outcome of the protest here. So please don't think, oh geez, if I report, something's going to run into infringement, and so therefore decide not to report the incident. We need to keep track of the incidents are happening and work out ways to try and reduce them. Okay, so please do always report any incidents you have. One of the main rules, if you're a sailing vessel and you're overtaking a power-driven vessel, you've still got to give way. Okay? Just because you've got sails up doesn't mean you automatically have right of ways. Okay, so think about that when you're coming across a small little putt, a tinny or whatever. That might be a higher boat or something like that. Okay, if you're overtaking, if you're coming from more than 22.5 degrees above the beam, you're an overtaking vessel. You've got to keep clear. Ships and ferries. As you know, we've got a few ferries and a few ships that go in the harbour. There's special regulations that apply to both ships and ferries. The ferries all have video cameras on the front of them, and they have a lot of they have a tracking system on them as well, AIS, automatic recording. Their cameras on the front, on the face forward on the front of the ferry, show their speed, heading, and give a really good view of obviously what's happening ahead of them. We just 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago now, received some pretty damning footage of a boat crossing the bow of a ferry. It also records the sound, so it records their sound signals that they give, and it shows any course changes they do. Manly ferries in particular take a long way to stop. Their cruising speed's about 14 knots. Okay, so they're covering about 7 metres per second, a bit over. For them to stop, to go into a crash stop, it takes them about 45 seconds to stop the vessel. In that time, they cover about 400 metres. They can't engage the forward propeller. Obviously, if there's a boat in front of them, they can't engage the forward propeller to reverse. So, obviously, because that's going to be a great big mincing machine, it's going to chop anything up in its path. So, be very mindful of how far it actually takes a Manly ferry to stop. For that reason, 200 metres is the clearance distance in front of a Manly ferry. If you're not sure, get out of the way. Okay? Especially, I've had the question in these sort of briefings before, with a ship or that sort of thing. Am I expected, if I'm becalmed, what am I expected to do? Am I expected to start the engine and get out of the way? Short answer, yes. Okay? If you need to seek redress for starting your engine, then you need to do that. But basically, if there's a ship coming through, rather than have your vessel hanging off the bow of a ship, you might put yourself out of one race, but it's better than putting your vessel and your crew under the bows of a ship and in danger. As it says there, you've got there's reasonable sort of fines there for impeding a seagoing ship. It's $1,500. For crossing the bow of a ferry in a really dangerous situation, the fine for that's $500, reckless navigation. So it carries a pretty weighty fine. We don't like to give them out. We don't like to enforce them. We'd rather you guys make sure that you keep clear of the ferries. I've had the question, how do you know which way the ferry should have a pretty good idea. If you're a regular sailor on the harbour, you get a pretty good idea of where the ferries are going, which wharves they're going to. For example, like the Manly ferries going around Bradley's Head, if they're going outbound towards Manly, they will 99% of the time keep the safe water mark on their port side and travel around it. The only time that they will deviate from that is if they request clearance to pass on the north side of the safe water mark, and they'll do that on Channel 13 with Sydney Port's VTS. So, and the only reason they'll do it is that if there's some sort of obstruction on the south side. So you can pretty much guarantee that that Manly ferry is going to use that safe water mark to go out, and on the way back it's going to go between Bradley's and the safe water mark. The Zoo ferry is pretty obvious where they go, they pretty much stick to a course. Similarly, the Neutral Bay ferries and the Rose Bay and Watson's Bay sort of ferries keep a pretty sort of straight run. You've got a fairly good idea of where they go. So keep a good look out for them. The faster ones, yeah, they can sort of sneak up on you a little bit, but just make sure you remember always looking out for them. Especially when you're flying, say, big asymmetrics and that sort of thing where your vision's obscure, make sure you're keeping a good proper look out. Okay, so basically with your ships, 500 metres off the bow, the ships these days all have an escort vessel. So it's either one of the city ports vessels, a maritime vessel, or a water police vessel with flashing lights going. They will move up and down. They won't necessarily always stay 500 metres in front, but your rule of thumb is don't pass between the escort vessel and the bow of the ship. In really light conditions where yachts are basically becalmed, the escort vessel may move further forward to give people more warning. Okay, so that distance may increase so that he can give you more warning to get out of the way that the ship's coming along. Okay, so that is your rule of thumb. If you pass between that escort vessel, especially if you said do not pass in front of the bow of the ship, if they come up and specifically spoken to you and said don't pass in front of the ship, and they've obviously got their flashing lights going, and then you cross in front of the ship, more than likely the pilot will then report the incident to Maritime. We will then get onto the club, and the club will more than likely disqualify you. Okay? In extreme cases, as I said, there could be an infringement for reckless navigation. Okay? We very rarely give them out, but the tool is there for us. The club, it's one of the conditions for the aquatic licence that all the clubs notify their members about this. Okay, so you've got 500 metres across the bow, 30 metres either side. We get some pretty close calls every now and then. This is a fairly old photo. It was taken a few years ago. This is taken from the escort vessel, looking back at the bow of the ship. There's another one taken from the bow of Manly ferry, and this was actually taken from the skipper's from the bridge of the Manly ferry. I don't know how good your eyes are, but it looks like the sheet hand on that edge will be sitting there looking at the master of the ferry. The skipper's trying to go as fast as he can to get across the bow. That's just heading north up and down the Bradley. Again, that's a couple of years old, but in the last couple of weeks I've received some pretty good footage from a pilot of a 30-foot yacht off Bradley's, where as he goes across the bow of the ship, only about the top 2 feet of the mast of the yacht is visible from the bridge. And then some other photos from the tug that was alongside the ship of it just appearing in front of the ship, and by the time he was basically becalmed, and by the time the ship got up alongside, he was probably 30 metres or so off to the side of the ship. Really close call. And it gets the pilots get really upset about it because obviously here they are driving a 50,000 tonne tanker or whatever, and they've got no way of stopping this thing. And for them, it's going to be a lot of paperwork if they run over the top of it. Everyone's there, as well as yours. With the orange diamond on the ferries, it gives them priority over sailing vessels. Okay, so it's not ultimate right of way, but it is priority. Again, they've got schedules, they've got set routes they've got to keep to. Right? They will deviate. As I said, they do have cameras. All the ferries are fitted with cameras and tracking devices and that sort of thing. So they are audible to their managers and bosses and that sort of thing. But they also have a lot of evidence on their side if something does go wrong. Okay, so if you're thinking about cutting across the ferry, just think about what sort of things, when it comes into I said, he said, and they pull out the video evidence, and you're saying, well, yeah, but I was miles away. well, yeah, the camera says something different. So keep that in the back of your mind, but yeah, they've got priority. And so they will, in years gone by, or I suppose more recently, because they are more accountable with cameras and that sort of thing, maybe the ferry master's behaviour has, there's always been that questionable thing about, oh, they were hunting me down, they were chasing me, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. We've heard that many, many times, but I suppose now that we've got all this sort of reporting type mechanisms on the ferries, that the evidence will speak for themselves and they are much more accountable for it as well, and I think they know that also. But spare a thought for them as well, when they're trying to get through a fleet, they've got a job to do as well, they're trying to get somewhere also. Safe watermark. I believe that the last rule night there was some discussion about this, about the traffic separation scheme, whether there was a traffic separation scheme around Bradley's Head, that sort of thing. There is no traffic separation scheme there, so it's not an obligation for all vessels to keep it at port. This is Bradley's Head is one of our major blind spots on the harbour. A few years ago we had 4 deaths on the south side of Bradley's Head. It was at night. One of the vessels was on the wrong side of the channel. There's all sorts of issues there, but it is a blind corner. We do get a lot of recreational vessels heading downstream, so heading towards Manly from the bridge, but it will cut the corner. For ferries and charter boats coming the other way, it automatically puts them in the oncoming traffic. And so you get this head-on situation. So if you are cruising, just casual sailing, that sort of thing, motoring, if you can leave it at port, it helps everyone. If we're all leaving it on the same side, it reduces the congestion around there. The race courses, I think, pretty much tend to keep you on the correct side of it these days. And one of the things we do when the aquatic licence is put into maritime, we do have a look at the race courses to make sure there's no navigation marks being used, and the courses generally try to keep you on the right side of the channel. That's great, and we do appreciate everyone's assistance on this one. It is a thing we try to educate people to try and get them on the port side where possible. Again, keep a good eye on the traffic coming around the corner. You've got Manly ferries, motorboats, that sort of stuff, and especially the ships coming down. If you're out sailing at night, just a quick thing on the side, apart from your racing as well, please don't just use a tricolour on the harbour. Your tricolour will get lost in amongst the background lights really easily. Deck level navigation lights are much more obvious to other skippers that are navigating, especially in runabouts and that sort of thing, that are moving at high speed, that don't necessarily look up above the horizon. Their field of view is nice, low along the water, not up where your top of your mast is. When you're under motor, your steaming light needs to be a minimum of 1 metre above your side lights. So having a tricolour technically doesn't meet the coal reefs requirements anyway. So, and if you are sailing around the harbour at night as well, just keep a torch handy in the cockpit just to be able to shine on the sails, just to every now and then, just to let the other boats know that you are actually on the sail, and then it just makes you more visible. A yacht only having to have a port and starboard light and a stern light can sometimes disappear into the background pretty easily. It can be quite hard to see. Make sure your navigation lights are visible, they're covering the correct arcs, and there's plenty of power coming out of them. So when you're under sail, just a port, starboard and stern light at night, and when you're under motor, also have your steaming light on. That's one we see, and don't see quite often. Basically, the end of the story, the end of the day, you're the skipper, you're the responsible. Any questions? Really? Oh, wow. Jeez, I get out of that easy. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Happy sailing.